Hello, everyone. My name is John Karate with Davis Homes. I have been with Davis for over 13 years, and I help people on the on your lot side of our business design and build custom homes. Um, I have been in the real estate business for 28 years. In that time, I've bought, sold, developed over 5,000 acres of ground and 10,000 residential units. Davis Homes has been building homes in Indiana since the 1950s and are in the third generation of building. Today, I want to talk about site costs. So if you're watching this video, you're contemplating potentially going out and trying to find your own land, trying to find your own lot. And I want to talk about the site costs that are associated with those particular properties. When you're building custom on your lot, there's three costs that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with your budget. There is the land cost, and the land cost is a fixed cost. It is what it is once you negotiate it. And then you have the site costs, and the site costs are all those things that you have to do to make that land buildable. And site costs are unique for every piece of land or lot that you come across. Every piece of property has its own unique characteristics. And then, of course, the last cost is the building cost. The building cost really is the only one that's flexible. Site costs are what they are. They do not care about what your budget is. It's what you have to do to that land to make that property buildable. And so hopefully today we can go through a site cost sheet. We can talk about all the different issues you should be looking for and an expectation of what those costs may be as you're evaluating different properties. So I'm going to share my screen. And this is what we do with customers when we meet them and they have a piece of property that they want us to take a look at and get an idea of what site costs are. Once again, you need to understand site costs so that you know what you're dealing with on a particular piece of property, whether that's in a developed community, whether that's an urban location, or whether that's on a 5-acre piece of property. So I'm going to go down the list. We're going to kind of fill in some of these things. I can send you the site cost worksheet as well if you request it, so that you can kind of have a checklist as you're evaluating properties. So the first item on the list, we kind of have a bunch of permits, and some of these will apply and some of these won't apply. It really depends upon the municipality that you're in. Are you dealing with a city that has a lot of regulations? Are you dealing with a county that typically has a little bit less regulation? So, but everybody's pretty much going to have an erosion control permit or erosion fencing. That's the black fence that you see around building sites. Typically, those permits are going to be maybe $150, $100 to $150. Drainage permits, anytime that you have a septic system and you're going into a drainage system, sometimes a county or municipality will require a drainage permit. Once again, $150 range for a drainage permit. Building permits. Building permits are, and the cost of that building permit is determined by the municipality. And usually it's done based upon the square footage of the house and an associated cost per square foot. Or it could be based upon the actual building value of the home as well. Inside those building permits, you may also have park impact fees and road impact fees, particularly in municipalities as well. So, building permits could be $1,000 to maybe even up to $7,000, just depending upon the type of building and where you're building. Driveway permits are typically done in an unplatted subdivision where you're building on 5 acres of ground and you have to establish a new cut on that drive, typically, a couple $100 for your driveway permit. Water permits are the fees that you are going to pay to a municipality or a water company in order to hook on, to have the right to hook on to that water system. I've seen those be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. Okay. Sewer permit, if you're in a developed community, you have access to sewer. Once again, that is just for the fee to hook onto that sewer. Typically, those are a little bit higher. I would say about $2,000 to $4,000 range for your sewer permit. Some counties require well permits. Once again, not much in a well permit, but be aware of it. Septic permits. So anytime that you do a septic system, you have to get approved through the health department. And sometimes there's a septic permit fee as well, somewhere around that $150 range is kind of normal. Okay. The next item we're going to get into is septic design and engineering. So if you're looking at building with a septic system, some counties require an engineered stamped septic design. And those fees typically run about $800 for us in order to actually have a stamped designed septic system. Soil testing also refers to septic systems. The first thing you want to do if you find a piece of property that you're thinking about buying is getting a soil test done. What that soil test is going to do is tell you the type of soils that you're dealing with and the type of septic system that you're going to have to put in. Okay. Permanent utilities. Permanent utilities are typically hooking up the permanent electric. Sometimes there's fees associated with that. Sometimes there's not. I can say that's going to be somewhere around $400 to $1,000. It really just depends upon the utility company. We always have in here some utility information so we know that who we're dealing with, who we need to contact as well. Some lenders will require a foundation survey. That's an update to the current site plan, and it could be required for mortgage purposes. Typically, those are about $300. A plot plan is required on all sites. That's going to show the physical layout of the property and the location of the home on that property. Those are about $800. And then we have the physical staking of the house. That's where we go out in the field and we place what we call a big box. So that's going to be 10-foot offset of the corners, and that's about $400. Okay. The next thing we talked about earlier was silt fencing. That black fence is buried into the ground. The purpose of a silt fence is to capture any type of runoff from disturbed soils so that it doesn't get into the drainage system. It'd be around $800 for your silt fence. And once again, that really depends upon the municipality that you're dealing with. If you are building in a developed community, street sweeping may be required. A lot of times as you're building a house and you have a muddy site, you may drag mud into the streets, and those communities are going to want that street cleaned. You know, that could be upwards of $500 to do some street sweeping. Water service is the actual physical connection to the house. And that really just depends upon where does that water service come from. If you're in a community, typically you're looking at about call it 1,600 and up to hook on from the street. Whereas, you know, if you're in an on your lot situation and you have access to water and you're running several hundred feet, you know, that could get, you know, maybe up to $5,000, just depending upon how far off the road you are. Well service. If you're building in an area that doesn't have access to municipal water service, you will have to do a well. We have pricing with C&J well services. Typically start around $8,000. That would be the drilling up to 85 feet, connection to the house, and then your pressure tank in the house as well. Wells can be more expensive than that if they have to go deeper for water as well. But typically, you know, we're hitting water, you know, at the depths in the basic package. Sewer service, once again, this is the physical connection to your house. It's going to be very similar to the water if you're in a community. It's probably going to start about $1,600 for a sewer connection. Physically running it to the house if it's at the road can be a lot more if it's located across the street. If you're in a downtown location, sometimes those sewers are in the middle of the road and you have to do street cuts. I've seen sewer connections be upwards of $20,000 to $25,000. Next thing is septic system, and septic system has a wide range. And typically we're dealing with 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom systems. Once again, those soil tests are going to determine what that cost of that septic system is going to be as far as the type of septic system. Is it going to be an in-ground system, a raised system, a pump system? There's a perimeter drain that goes around typically all septic systems. We have to find an outlet for that perimeter drain as well. Sometimes you have to run that perimeter drain a long ways to make the proper connection to discharge the that drainage pipe. So anywhere from 12,000 to $30,000 is kind of what you typically see for septic systems. And once again, that's very site dependent, and it's very dependent upon how many bedrooms you're going to have in your home as well. Next thing is the construction driveway. So anytime we come onto a new site, we've got to cut in for a construction driveway. In a community, you might be about $1,500 if we're right there at the road, 30 to 40 foot setback. Whereas if you're in an on your lot situation and you're a few hundred feet to several hundred feet off the road, I've seen construction driveways go up to $20,000. So it really just depends upon the length of that driveway. We use kind of a price per square foot of that driveway. So we would calculate the square footage, multiply it by 2.25, and that's typically going to kick out a pretty good range for your construction driveway. Culverts. If we have to put a culvert in underneath the drive, typically those are going to be about $1,200. That's to allow water to pass underneath the driveway so you're not damming up your property and creating a big drainage mess and washing out your driveway as well. Here's a couple of those fees that we talked about. Park impact fees. I've seen those be as low as $1,000 to $2,500. Next thing, road impact fee, kind of the same thing, $1,000 to $2,500. Anytime that you're looking at a piece of property, call the municipalities who will be in that jurisdiction, ask them what their permitting fees are going to be like so you have the right expectation going forward. Service disconnects. So this would be a disconnect on the electrical if you're running a connection. Typically we'll see that with a 400 amp, or if you're running from maybe a pole barn back to a house. Temporary power or generators. If we don't have power on site and we have to use generators, typically there's about $500 is what we put in there. Builder's risk policy. We will provide your builder's risk policy for you. It's a flat fee. I think it's $1,225 or $1,125. You can also get your own builder's risk policy as well, but we've got pretty good pricing associated with it. Builder's risk policy covers things during your building, such as theft, acts of Mother Nature, vandalism. So those are the things that are covered with the builder's risk policy. Next thing is final grade. So when the house is complete, concrete is poured, rough grade is done, we're going to come back and do a final grade. And that final grade smooths out that property so that it's ready for soils. And typically that's going to be somewhere around $1,200 for your final grade. After the final grade done, you're going to do a seed and straw. So that's coming in, putting seed and straw on the property 50 feet around the house. Okay. Sod is really just determined by the amount of sod, and that's kind of a to be determined. Same thing with trees and mulch, any type of landscaping materials that would need to be required. Some communities require a landscape package. If you're building on your own property outside of an HOA, typically all we'll do is a final grade seed and straw, and then you'll come back in and do your own landscaping. Lot clearing. So lot clearing would be things such as trees, brush, stump removal, anything we need to get that building envelope for the house cleared. Typically you'll see a couple $1,000, to upwards of maybe $15,000. It really just depends upon how much material needs to be removed. Is that material staying on site? Are stumps being removed, or is it being pushed in a pile? Is it being dragged off site? Okay. Rock removal, that's really just a to be determined. We typically don't run into rock too much, but it is something that you have to look out for as well. Hauling in dirt in and out. So this covers two things. If you're digging a basement on a small lot, we're going to have to haul out that dirt. There's not going to be enough room on that lot to balance the lot and get rid of all that basement dirt. On the flip side of that, you may be building a house that has a lot of topography. You may have to bring in dirt to bring that elevation up. So, dirt haul pricing can range anywhere from somewhere around $2,000, maybe up to $7,000, just depending upon how much dirt or how much dirt needs to come in as well. Leveling out dirt. So once again, I mentioned kind of that small lot, you're building a basement, you've got to move that excess soil around that site. This can be anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 for machine time, just depending upon how much dirt that you have. Okay. Driveway crushed stone, typically that's going to be a top coat of stone. We'll call it number 53 stone. That really locks in that base of stone that you have in there. And usually this is done in an on your lot situation where you have a long gravel driveway to a concrete pad. And that's really just determined based on the length of the driveway. The next item is concrete. So typically the items that this is going to cover is going to be driveways, private sidewalks, parking pads. So real simple, we use $6 a square foot in current standards or current pricing today. We're a little bit below $6 a square foot, but I always like to run those a little bit higher. And really that just determines how much concrete do you want to pour, how big of a parking pad do you want to have. Typically off that parking pad, you're going to have some sort of sidewalk that goes to your front door. The next thing is public walks. So once again, if you're building in a developed community or someplace where public walks are required across the front of your property, that's just going to be on a square foot basis is $6 a square foot. Okay. Mowing. So typically in communities, we want to keep those properties mowed as well. In an on your lot situation, it doesn't matter that much, but we may have a couple mowings in there, so you might want to throw, $400 or $500 in there as a budget for mowing. Some communities, next thing is concrete washout. Some communities will have a community concrete washout. If you're in an on your lot situation, typically we're going to have to build one of those on site. Okay. Next thing is a mailbox. Some communities require your mailbox up front. In an on your lot situation where you're outside of an HOA, you may not be required to put up a mailbox or have us put up a mailbox for you. Sorry about that. Next thing is burying sump lines. So if you're building on a crawl space or a basement, you will have a sump pit. Most people will want to get that sump line buried into the ground and away from the house. And so it's $600 to bury your sump line. Okay. Next thing is electrical and utility usage. During the course of the build, we will be getting bills for the electrical that is being used to build the house. We usually typically use a budget of about $500, and those costs come in typically lower than that. Rough grading. Rough grading is the balancing of the site. So once you dig that foundation, or once you dig that basement, we need to spread that dirt around the site so that it's balanced. That's what rough grading does, backfills the finished concrete that's been poured. Dumpster and trash, we will have a dumpster on site. Typically we'll run that budget at about $1,500. We are required to have a porta potty on site. Typically we'll run that budget at about $600. Retaining walls are just kind of one of those to be determined, and that would be required if you have to cut out a piece of property you're dealing with, a piece of property that has some topography and you have to retain some of that, maybe that hillside that you cut out. Irrigation systems, once again, those are to be determined. That really just depends upon how big your yard is. Once again, some HOAs and some communities will require an irrigation system. Demolition, that's also another to be determined. We build on a lot of lots that have existing structures, existing homes, barns, sheds. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. If you are tearing down a house, I would say 10,000 to 20,000 is what you typically will see for demolition of a home. Non-level site condition. So this is something you really need to pay attention to. All of our houses are priced as if the lot that you're going to be building on is flat. and very rarely do we have a perfectly flat lot. So we have to adjust the foundation due to the topography of that site. And so you may have taller crawl walls, you may have more fill. This typically you'll see charges anywhere from $1,500 maybe up to $8,000, just depending upon how much taller walls and fill that we may have on site in order to keep that finished floor level at the right elevation. Non-level framing labor, this would be if you have to step down a brick ledge or step down your foundation and we have to frame more walls rather than pouring concrete. Once again, that's just kind of a to be determined cost. Brick material, once again, I mentioned dropping down a brick ledge and dealing with topography. So both of these, you have to add extra brick to the house based upon the topography of the site. Same thing, if you're not doing brick as your siding and you're doing traditional siding, which would be vinyl siding or LP siding, same type of thing, dropping that brick ledge or dropping that foundation down and then covering it with siding. Same thing for paint, painting typically that material, and that's going to be LP siding as well. Last thing on the list is a yard light. So some communities require a yard light. Typically, those are going to be about $400 to $500, and typically those are older communities. We don't see that much in newer communities. So you can use this list as you're looking at properties, and a lot of these won't apply in every situation. In fact, most won't, but it gives you a running list that you can kind of reference when evaluating a piece of property. Of course, we will also, free of charge, help you with that as well as you're evaluating a piece of property. So I recommend you give the experts here at Davis Homes on your lot side of our business a call if you're evaluating property, and we can certainly help you with that process. Hopefully all the information that was provided today you find useful. Go to davishomes.com for more information as well and to check out some of our floor plans. Feel free to reach out to me directly, Jchiarotti, JChiarotti at davishomes.com, and I can help with any questions that you may have as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video as well, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.